getting artesian well water for my batch of beer. So I'll need about 6 gallons of fresh artesian spring water. Now add 5 gallons of the artesian spring well water into a pot for boiling. Now the boiling pot will have to have water at a temperature of 155 degrees. Right now it's at 150. So at 155 degrees, then I will add the grains, and we will steep those grains for about a half an hour. One thing you should do before you actually start brewing is actually inventory the product that was included to make the beer. This beer is a Kiwi Crossing IPA, and I did check all of the product. I've got the corn sugar and the special grains that I'll use to steep in the 155 degree water, and then a number of different hops, and this here is the actual malt. This is the malt extract, and that's in the liquid form, and then we have powder extract. So I have all the products for making this Kiwi Crossing. Now while you wait for your water to get at the 155 degree temperature, you're going to prepare the specialty grains that you're going to be making your wort, which is basically your water and the grains. I've learned a trick to use a bowl and then put a muslin sock in the bowl and then dump the grains into the bowl and then tie the sock up at the top. Otherwise you have grains flying everywhere. Now once you have the temperature at 155 degrees and you have your grains in your muslin sack, you basically will let this soak in the water for about a half an hour. And this is actually steeping the oats, and this is what will give it some color and taste. Now we finished steeping the oats. That was cooking the grains at 155 degrees for a half an hour, and then brought the wort up to a boil. And now I've added the liquid and dry malt extracts, and I'm bringing this up to boil, at which point we'll cook it for an hour, and we'll add the hops and bitters over the course of the hour. Now that we have the wort in a rolling boil, I'm going to add the first few hops. These are Super Alpha New Zealand hops, and I'm going to add these into the wort, and these will cook for a full 60 minutes. Throughout the duration of the boiling, I'll be adding additional hops and bitters to the wort, but this will cook for a total of 60 minutes, at which point the wort will be done. Now once the wort has been cooked for an hour, then you need to decrease the temperature to 80 degrees, so I hooked it up to my wort cooler that I made out of copper tubing, and this will bring the water temperature down from boiling to 80 degrees in about 10 minutes. Now the temperature has been down to 80 degrees, and it's time to remove the wort chiller, and the next step is to take the beer and pour it into my fermentation pail. So that's what I'll be doing next. And I have a screen on there to filter the organic material like the hops and the bitters and everything that we've boiled into the wort when I was cooking it. And that will capture most of it, but some will get through. Now I've poured the beer into the fermentation pail. As you can see, the filter or the strainer caught a lot of the hops and everything that go into actually brewing the beer and giving it its flavor and taste. What I'm going to do is filter it into another pail, my sanitizer pail, and I'll filter it back into my fermentation pail, and we'll then add yeast. So now that I have the beer in my fermentation pail and I've swapped it in between the two different pails for a couple of reasons. First of all, to clean the matter out that the barley and hops and the bitters created when I brewed the beer, and then also to aerate it and get oxygen into the beer. Now what I'm going to do is add this liquid yeast, which you can tell has been expanding, and it's been expanding for about 4 hours or so. And I'm going to add it to the pail that I have in my the beer in my fermentation pail, and I'm going to dump it back and forth into these two pails a couple more times to oxygenate the yeast, which really gets the yeast activated and will do its part in the fermentation process. Now the next step is to take a little bit of a sample out of the fermentation pail, and I'm going to put it into my hydrometer reading, and this is going to give me a sense as to the amount of water there is with alcohol as well, the alcohol content. I'll take 3 of these readings. I'll take the initial one today, and it will tell me what the water content is, and the very last one before I keg it, I'll take one and I'll subtract the 2, and that gives me the alcohol content. So I'm just going to take a draw off of the fermentation pail here and see what we get for reading. Now I'm just taking a look at my hydrometer reading that I took from the sample of the beer. The hydrometer reading reads about 9%. So that's going to be my first marking, and I'll gauge everything after that. I'll expect this percentage to drop as the beer ferments, which essentially is replacing water with alcohol, and I'll have a pretty good idea as to what the percentage or alcohol content will be for the beer when I bottle it or keg it. Now this will be the final spot that I leave the fermentation pail for the next couple of weeks or so. It's in my furnace room because the temperature within the furnace room stays about 65 degrees, which is really the perfect temperature for beer to ferment. And as you can see on the top of the pail, I've got an airlock, which will allow the gases to release as it builds up pressure within the pail. And most of the activity for the fermentation process will start probably tomorrow evening and go for 3 or 4 days, but it will take about 2 weeks to complete the fermentation in this pail.